Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? It is week 11, and we need to start diving into some tight ends. The football kind. Because we've got 4 teams on a bye this week, and we've got 6 teams on a bye for Bye-Mageddon next week. You really need to have your tight end position locked down right now to get through the next couple of weeks. And if you don't, I've got some options for you that you may be able to toss in there and get some decent fantasy points from. And if you've been here all season, you know that we dive into a lot of pick'ems that we like during all of our start and sit shows. But Underdog really doesn't release a whole lot of pick'ems for tight ends this early in the week. So I want to encourage everyone out there that wants to play along with us or have been playing along with us to start doing now as a member here on the channel. All you need to do is hit that blue join button down below, become a member, and get access to our exclusive Discord. You're going to get a ton of pick'ems over there that we don't announce to the public every single week. And a lot of people are finishing in the green with those picks. And on top of that, you're going to get a ton of exclusive content here on YouTube that nobody else is getting. So hit that blue join button down below, become a member today, and start reaping all of the rewards that you get with it. Thursday Night Football may not have the best options this week, but we're going to be taking a look at Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert for a couple of different reasons. Zach Ertz had 8 targets last week, which ended up leading the team. But this matchup this week is not all that great. If Zach Ertz can get upwards of 8 targets once again, going up against a tough Philadelphia defense, then he absolutely could put together 5, 6, 7 fantasy points. But Philadelphia is one of only 2 teams that is not allowed a touchdown to a tight end as of yet. So if you're playing Zach Ertz, you're playing him for his potential floor and not his ceiling. With Dallas Goedert, you're playing for his ceiling because you're banking on a touchdown happening with Dallas Goedert. Only 3 targets last week. He's definitely going to be the number 3 option behind Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. But on top of that, Philadelphia is probably going to run the ball an awful lot this week, which may not leave a whole lot of targets left over. Dallas Goedert was banged up last week, once again, unfortunately, and we'll monitor throughout the rest of the week in case he were to miss any more time because of that injury. The Chicago Bears secondary has been solid against the pass all season long, and for the Green Bay Packers this week, you're really going to need to make sure that you utilize Tucker Kraft so you can spread the ball around and get it to your open players as much as possible. That's going to be the best way possible to beat the Chicago Bears. So while the numbers don't look great for Tucker Kraft this week, he's going to need to be a primary option in the passing game. Maybe he's a little bit closer to beating a medium risk than he is a low risk start this week, but I definitely feel like he's got a lot of potential and a lot of upside in this matchup. Listen, if you're looking for high upside risk at the tight end position, you may as well start Taysom Hill and completely forget about Cole Kmet. This offense just isn't playing that well right now. Shane Waldron has been fired, so maybe we see a little bit of a change in philosophy going forward. But I'm not going to risk it with Cole Kmet until I see it way more consistently than I have so far this season. Mac Jones is going to have to find somebody in this offense that he's comfortable throwing to. And hopefully it ends up being Evan Ingram, but it's really yet to be seen who he may develop that rapport with. Now, Detroit is currently allowing the second fewest fantasy points per game to the tight end position. They do a really good job with their linebackers and their slot corners guarding opposing tight ends. And that's why Evan Ingram is going to need a substantial amount of targets this week to be fantasy viable. I'm talking like more than 8 targets. If he doesn't get that, he's not going to have enough volume to really become fantasy startable. And more than likely, he finds himself well outside the top 12 because of that. This is a great matchup for the Detroit tight ends, but unfortunately Sam Laporta is dealing with an AC joint sprain. He hasn't been ruled out for week 11 as of yet, but personally, I don't think he plays. This matchup should be an easy one for the Lions, and they should have no problem winning this one. Give him some rest and let him come back healthy. So even though this is a great matchup, we're probably not going to end up using Sam Laporta this week unless he does play and he's not limited. But here's one for you. If you're dealing with injuries at the tight end position or you got people on a bye, take a look at Brock Wright later in the week on your waiver wire. If Sam Laporta doesn't play, Brock Wright has a lot of touchdown potential. If you spent a late round pick on TJ Hockenson hoping for that shot in the arm to your fantasy team when he came back this season, congratulations, because so far it's working out perfectly. 9 targets last week tied Justin Jefferson for the team lead, and he looks like he's going to be one of the primary targets in this offense moving forward. And for Tennessee, they're one of those teams that continue to rotate 2 or 3 tight ends at a time, and none of them are really getting a ton of targets, so they are a must avoid no matter what. Miami did an excellent job on Monday Night Football at limiting the Los Angeles Rams, and they could end up doing the same thing to the Las Vegas Raiders this week. Now, if you own Brock Bowers, you're going to be starting him no matter what. Really, the only reason you wouldn't be starting Brock Bowers is if you were to own, let's say, Trey McBride, who's on a bye, so that doesn't matter this week anyway, or a guy like George Kittle. So Brock Bowers is making his way into your lineup, but I am very concerned about his potential this week because Las Vegas, to me, just doesn't have it right now. Gardner Minshew throws way too many interceptions. This offense really has trouble moving the football, and this Miami defense got after the Rams last week and could do the same thing again. Jonnu Smith only had 4 targets last week, but he's definitely someone we are monitoring for the rest of the season, especially with that wrist injury to Tyreek Hill. Jonnu Smith, if he's getting 4 to 6 targets every single week, because he does offer some big playability, is giving you an okay floor for the tight end position. Now, in fantasy football, if I tell you someone's floor is like 5 or 6 points, you're probably laughing at that point. But this is the tight end position where 5 or 6 points really, to me, is a really great floor if we can lock that in every single week. Davis Allen for the LA Rams got a few looks last week, and he's going to be a guy that is going to be on my radar over the next couple of weeks to see how he continues moving forward. It's just hard for me to jump on board with the Rams tight end when Colby Parkinson basically had all the targets to himself earlier in the year with no Puka Nacua and no Cooper Kupp, and still was not able to find any fantasy relevancy. So we'll keep an eye on Davis Allen when we'll see if something continues going his way, and if it does, maybe we change our mind. But as of right now, I definitely think he's a guy that could go up and down depending on the game flow every single week. This is a really solid matchup this week for Hunter Henry, and I would love to put him at low risk, but after the involvement of Austin Hooper last week, I'm just not able to do it. Hunter Henry still had 4 targets last week, which is okay for the tight end position, but we're going to need to get him a few more this week, and if he does, he could have a much better upside than what we saw. We definitely could have a big week on the horizon for David Njoku, going up against the New Orleans Saints, who currently allow the 8th most receiving yards to the tight end position. Absolutely fire David Njoku up as one of the safest tight end options that you could put in your lineup this week that also has some of the highest upside. Now, the numbers against tight ends look really good for Cleveland because of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who is injured right now and likely will not be playing anytime soon. So because of the JOK injury, it does open up an opportunity for the Saints to take some more advantage of that. But I'm not really going to jump on board with either Juwan Johnson or Foster Moreau in this week's matchup. Both of them have touchdown potential, but really in terms of volume and upside from that, I'm not seeing it. If you want to start one of them, start Taysom Hill. He's going to continue to have a floor of like tight end 14 through 20, but his ceiling really puts him around tight end 6. We just haven't really seen that an awful lot this season. If you want to continue to risk it with them, be my guest. Well, not a whole lot to see in this matchup for tight ends. When you talk about Indianapolis, 3 tight ends last week saw in between 23 and 27 snaps respectively. That's not nearly enough snaps. It's basically a 3-way tie on who's out on the field, and none of them are really getting any targets. For the New York Jets, everybody looked bad last week, but we know Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams are going to be the number 1 and the number 2. And then you have to add in the fact that Breece Hall is going to get some targets and probably going to run quite a bit in this matchup. If you're trying to start Tyler Conklin, you're keeping your fingers crossed and you're hoping for that touchdown, because really anything outside of that probably isn't going to happen. You know what they say, better late than never, and Mark Andrews is making up for lost time after completely destroying rosters earlier in the year. I would be willing to bet the majority of the people reaping the rewards of Mark Andrews right now picked him up off waivers after his original owner dumped him just out of pure frustration. If there's no Isaiah Likely again this week, Mark Andrews is going to be a really good bet at the tight end position to potentially have a big day. It's not the best matchup in the world for him, but Lamar Jackson is looking his way a lot right now. This is a really difficult one to try and call this week with Pat Freiermuth. Going up against a Ravens defense that allows the third most receiving yards to tight ends, this feels like it would be a smash spot for Pat Freiermuth. But he's only getting like 3 targets a game right now. It's great that he scored last week, but we can't take advantage of Pat Freiermuth if they're not even looking his way. And unfortunately, it's not happening enough. Now, a lot of people may be dealing with things at the tight end position where they don't have a choice. Pat Freiermuth has a good enough matchup this week that I would not hate trying to play him. You just have to curb your enthusiasm, even though it's a great matchup. It felt like Kyle Pitts was on the cusp of giving us consistent tight end 1 performances, and then now he's gone 2 weeks without being a top 12 option. Really, this week for Kyle Pitts, it's not the worst matchup in the world, but going up against the Denver Broncos, who do a really good job in the secondary, it's going to depend on who ends up lining up across from him. A traditional tight end does a pretty good job against Denver, but Kyle Pitts doesn't line up like a traditional tight end a majority of the time. So it really depends on the formations they run and what defender covers him. This is a pretty solid matchup for Adam Trautman, but it was a solid matchup last week for Adam Trautman as well. And he had 1 reception on 1 target. So if you want to risk the touchdown potential, you could go with Adam Trautman. Me personally, I'll try and find somebody else this week. Noah Fant looked like he may be on the brink of giving us some fantasy value the rest of the season, but they've really started rotating their tight ends a whole lot more. And they like AJ Barner quite a bit as well, who's been seeing more and more time on the field. So right now, the Seattle tight end situation is a big avoid for me. George Kittle is in the elite status of tight ends right now. Not only has he provided the same upside that we've become accustomed to over the last few years, but he's provided us with way more consistency than what we've been used to. There's not a whole lot of tight ends that you're looking at and starting over George Kittle. Travis Kelce has been a top 5 tight end each of the last 3 games. And he's been a top 7 tight end in 5 of his last 6 games. And with those 3 straight top 5 performances, he has at least 12 targets in every single game. Travis Kelce is getting way too much volume right now to not be one of the safer tight end options in all of football. Kansas City allows the 2nd most fantasy points per game and the most receiving yards to opposing tight ends. But Dalton Kincaid is banged up this week. He's got an issue that he's working through with his knee, and we still don't know whether or not he's going to be able to play. We'll keep an eye on that throughout the rest of the week. But if he can't go, Dawson Knox is going to be the guy that I would recommend replacing him with. And if you've got Dalton Kincaid in the late games and you don't have another option on your team, I would recommend picking up Dawson Knox right now. So then if Kincaid can't go, you can toss in Dawson Knox in a really good matchup. It's really hard to get a grasp on what's happening with the tight end position each week with Cincinnati. Obviously, when T. Higgins comes back, the tight end position isn't going to have nearly the same type of value. But Mike Gesicki last week played almost 60 snaps, which is a very heavy workload for a tight end. But then when you take a look at the numbers, Tanner Hudson is the one that scored and had a better week than him. So this week, I'm going with Mike Gesicki as my Mando must-avoid tight end of the week. Those snap numbers and his performances a couple of weeks ago are going to bring people back to him as a potential play this week. But I can't do it. I have to skip on him. And I'm skipping on Mike Gesicki the same way I'm skipping on Oders this holiday season. When you're running to different gatherings all over the place with your family, friends, whatever it may be, you're going to work up a little bit of a sweat. Keep yourself smelling great with Mando, who has a clinically proven formula that defeats odors for up to 72 hours. So when you're running all over the place and you're busy this holiday season, head on over to Shop Mando and use code word headliners so you get $5 off one of their starter packs. Make sure that you try it out today. You want a shot in the dark this week? Let's go with Will Dissly. Last week he had 6 targets, and I thought maybe he could be a decent option. His 6 targets led the team, and then now he's got a really good matchup going up against Cincinnati. For me personally, I've got to roll with Will Dissly. I think he's a much safer option than everybody on his team in the passing game outside of Ladd McConkey. He's got a little bit of upside with him, not a whole lot of touchdown potential, but 6 targets in a matchup where he could put together some really big plays offers a good ceiling. It's pretty simple when it comes to Dalton Schultz for me this week. If Nico Collins doesn't play, he stays as a medium risk with a pretty decent floor, even if his ceiling isn't all that high. If Nico Collins does play, he's going to end up falling back to a high risk play for me. Now, going up against Dallas, this is not a bad matchup for him, and maybe he does find the end zone, but I really think Houston's going to run the ball an awful lot, and if Nico plays, he's going to get a lot of targets. So will Tank Dell, and I don't know if the ceiling is all that great for Dalton Schultz, and his floor gets lower as well. Houston allowed a big touchdown last week to Sam Laporta, but even with that play included, they're still allowing the fewest receiving yards to opposing tight ends right now, and it's not even close. Until I see Cooper Rush out there getting the ball to Jake Ferguson consistently, he's going to be a little bit more of a risky start for me, especially in a matchup that is this tough. Well, there you have it, Headliner Nation, my start and sit analysis for the tight end position every single matchup here in week 11, and I included some dark horse candidates that you may need as well if you're dealing with anyone on a bye. Make sure you hit that like button, make sure you subscribe, turn on the bell notifications, and think about becoming a member today. But for now, Headliner Nation, all of you stay safe and healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.